A few months ago, you're aware that I took a team to Uganda back in July. 4 of us went to Uganda on a mission trip. And after we came back, Abby Kelderman, who was part of the team, probably towards the end of August, she asked me a question that's really been, bugging me. And she said, look, we've been back in Australia now for a few weeks, and we went and visited all these families, and we took them food hampers. What difference did we really make? By now, all that food we gave to these families is gone. And they're still in poverty, they're still sick, and life is still really bad for them. So what was the point of us going? What difference did we really make? That's an honest question. We go on mission trips and we serve and we give and we pray hard for people. But when we step back and look, the poverty for a lot of these people is still there, and their sickness and the hardship of life. And it's easy for us to wonder, did we really make a difference? I suppose part of the reason why that really struck a chord with me was I had the same question back in 2023 when we were in Uganda. Our family visited for Alia's wedding, and part of what we did was with the Kuza Children's Foundation, we visited the slums in Kampala, and we took food hampers out to different families. And as we walked through the slums, I was behind the group, and I watched as my wife and my girls walked in front of me, hand in hand with the children that live in the slums. And they were laughing and smiling, and they were just happy to be walking with us. And I really started thinking to myself, what difference are we really making to these kids? This is their life. This will probably always be their life. These kids will probably never leave these slums. And to be honest, their children will probably live in these slums as well. And they'll have the same struggles with poverty and just life being hard. And we go back home to clean water and electricity and safety and opportunity, and they're still stuck here. I really felt discouraged, because it's really easy to measure success by what we can see, by whether someone's situation changes, and by whether things get better, whether things improve. And later that day, I spoke with Eddie from Kuza about just this wrestle I was having. This young man reminded me that this us going to the slums was never just about us bringing food. This was about us bringing God's hope to these families. See, sometimes the greatest difference we make isn't in changing someone's circumstances. It's in bringing the hope of Christ into the middle of them. That question Abby asked isn't just a question for people who go on overseas mission trips. It's probably a question that every follower of Jesus at some point asks. You might not be walking through the slums of Kampala, but maybe you're walking through the offices of your workplace, or down the street in your neighbourhood, or sitting at the dinner table with family who don't yet know Christ. And sometimes you wonder the same thing. Am I making any difference? Does my faith really matter here? So as I tried to figure out an answer for Abby, as I tried to work my way through this, I went back to the Gospels, and I reread the Gospel accounts of Jesus, looking for the moments when people's lives weren't changed. We know a lot of the stories about where Jesus would heal people, he'd bring people back from death, he'd feed thousands of people. We know those stories of miracles. But I specifically was looking for when were the times where Jesus didn't change their circumstance. When were the times that Jesus just was with someone? And I started to notice something powerful. That often when people met Jesus, their outward situation didn't immediately change. But they did. Their poverty didn't suddenly disappear. Their social standing didn't instantly improve. Their surroundings didn't always get brighter. And their problems definitely didn't vanish. But somehow the presence of Jesus brought something deeper. Hope, forgiveness, peace, identity and purpose. Because Jesus didn't just come to make life easier. He came to bring life itself. And we find a great example of this in John chapter 4, where Jesus is with the disciples and he meets a Samaritan woman at a well. A woman with a painful and complicated history. 5 husbands, a broken reputation, and she's there drawing water alone in the middle of the day because she's trying to avoid her own community. And Jesus meets her right there, in her shame, in her loneliness, in her brokenness. He doesn't remove her from the village. He doesn't undo her past. He doesn't change her reputation. But he reveals who he is, the Messiah, the one who offers living water. And suddenly, she becomes the first evangelist in Samaria. She runs back to the very village who had shunned her, saying, "Come, see a man who told me everything I ever did." Same village, same people, same difficult circumstances, same messed up life. But she is different. She has hope, she has identity, she now has purpose. Jesus didn't change her environment, he changed her. Then in John chapter 8, we have a story about a woman caught in adultery. She's been dragged out, humiliated, surrounded by men gripping stones. Her sin is exposed and her shame is very public. By law, she's moments from death. But Jesus kneels down and writes in the dust, and then stands to say, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." And one by one, stones fall to the ground and the accusers walk away. And then Jesus turns to her and says, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, Lord. Neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin." Her external circumstances didn't magically get better. Her reputation didn't instantly change. She still lived in the same community. But inwardly, everything changed. She walked away not condemned, but forgiven. Not shamed, but restored. Not defined by her sin, but rather defined by grace. Jesus didn't erase her past. He redeemed her future. And then in Luke 23, we read about a thief on a cross beside Jesus. Talk about someone whose circumstances couldn't get worse. Nailed to a cross, gasping for breath, hours from death. And yet in that moment of hopelessness, this thief turns to Jesus and says, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus answered him, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." This criminal's earthly circumstances never changed. He still died that day. But his eternity changed instantly. from a criminal condemned by Rome to a man welcomed as a son of God. It's the power of the presence of Jesus. Hope that breaks through even in the places where nothing else can change. In each of these stories, the Samaritan woman, this woman caught in adultery, and the thief on the cross, circumstances didn't change, but people did. Jesus' presence brought something deeper, something circumstances could never give and that circumstances could never take away. Jesus brought hope to the hopeless. He brought forgiveness to the guilty. He brought peace to the anxious and the ashamed. He restored identity to the forgotten and rejected, and he awakened purpose in those who thought life was already over for them. So what does this mean for us? If Jesus often brought life-changing hope without changing the surrounding situation, then our calling as his followers is not to fix every circumstance, but to carry his presence into them. Our calling as his followers is not to fix every circumstance, but to rather carry the presence of Christ into them. And that sounds great. But how do we do that? How do we live out this responsibility of taking Christ with us into situations? Jesus himself described it like this in Matthew chapter 5. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. In this passage, Jesus starts telling us to be like salt and warns us not to lose our saltiness. Why? Salt makes a difference simply by being present. Salt doesn't transform the entire meal. It doesn't alter the colour. It doesn't remove any unpleasant ingredient. Salt isn't spectacular to look at. It's very plain. But salt enhances. It preserves, and salt creates thirst wherever it is applied. Salt draws out flavour in what is bland. It brings out what is already there. Just as Christians draw out goodness, kindness, and truth in places where they seem forgotten. Salt slows decay. Just as we stand against moral decline, injustice, and despair by simply living out the character of Christ. And salt creates thirst. And our lives should stir a longing in others for hope, meaning, and ultimately Jesus himself. So in your workplace, you may be the only one showing integrity. In your family, you may be the only one extending grace. In your neighbourhood, you might be the only one offering compassion or grace. You may not feel impressive or influential, but your presence is quietly preserving, gently influencing, and slowly awakening a thirst for God. And that difference you make may be invisible to you, but it is unmistakably clear in heaven. Then Jesus says, you are the light of the world. When we bring light into a dark room, the room doesn't change in any physical way. Nothing, the furniture doesn't get moved or anything like that. When we bring light in, the thing that happens is that light pushes back the darkness. Light shines whether the room changes or not. And even a small light makes a difference. A small light can change the atmosphere. It can give direction, it can help people see differently, and can even reveal another way. Light doesn't chase away every shadow. It simply shines. Jesus never told us to single-handedly fix the darkness of the world. He told us to shine in it. You don't have to fix everything in someone's life to shine. You just have to be present with the light of Christ in you. When you step into your workplace with kindness, when you listen deeply to a friend, when you encourage someone who's struggling, when you teach English to a refugee, when you sit and share a meal with someone that is suffering homelessness, you shine. Many of you are familiar with our involvement with the Winter Shelter program, and that for 13 weeks over winter we join with other churches in providing a safe place for those that are experiencing homelessness in Toowoomba. And the last week of Winter Shelter is always difficult. The atmosphere changes, the vibe gets a lot more serious. Because for the guests that haven't got a housing solution, at the end of that week means they go back onto the streets. And throughout that last week, anxiety and tension builds. The guests are very unsettled. This year, even one of our guests attempted to take their own life. And on our last Tuesday night, the last night that we had guests here at Humeridge, I sat with some of our guests and I talked to them how they were feeling. Talked to them about what was the next week going to look like for them. And they told me they weren't worried about going to live back on the streets. That was nothing new. They'd done it before. One of them, he'd lived this way for a couple of years. So going back onto the streets, knowing how to survive on the streets wasn't a big drama. They talked to me that the hardest thing for them was about losing the community that they had found in the church. They'd found people that had listened to them, people that had noticed them, people that had cared about them. They talked to me about how they felt like they finally belonged somewhere, that they weren't by themselves, but people loved them and were there for them. And they talked to me about being worried and even a little bit scared about going back into this uncertainty of living on the streets, back into loneliness, back into being invisible. One man even described it like going back into darkness, back to being unnoticed, back to not being seen at all. You might feel like your little light doesn't make a big difference, but darkness can never overcome even the smallest light. We may never see the full impact, but light always makes a difference. Our presence carries His presence wherever we go. The difference we make is not measured by visible circumstances. It's measured by the hope and the light we carry. I started this morning with a story from Uganda. I'm going to finish with another one. Part of what we did on our last trip was we went with the church and went out to an area and we baptised a group of people. And it's a 20-minute, 25-minute drive in our van to get to where there's water that we can do the baptism. And it's usually a couple of trips. And so after the baptisms, the van was taking a load of people back to the church. And so our team and a group of people, we started to walk back. And part of that walk back, we came to just a small trading centre, I suppose, a community. And as we came into this little area, a mother came up to us. And she asked, could we come to her home and to pray for her and her children, to pray for her family, and especially for her teenage daughter. Her teenage daughter was suffering from side effects from a medication she'd had a few years earlier. And the side effects of that had impacted her that down one side of her body, she had no strength. She carried her right arm and she couldn't walk properly. And there was an uncontrollable shake, just constant in her hand and in her leg. And so this mum, we went into her home and she asked us to pray for them. And so for this young lady, we knelt around her and we prayed for her. And see in the photo, we were able to put our hands on her, and I put my hands on her leg, and it was shaking. But when we prayed, the shaking stopped. And for the 10 minutes while we prayed over this young lady, there was no shaking. And when we finished praying, the shaking slowly came back. Just that couple of minutes afterwards, it was back how it was. And I left feeling really discouraged and really disappointed. A week earlier, we'd prayed over a lady and she was able to walk. And I had in my mind, cool, we've got the magic touch now. And so I was feeling really bad. And this young lady she was a lovely young lady. And we walked away and just were a little bit, just sad for her. And next day we came back to this community and, to do something else. And I saw the mum. And so I went up to her, and I was still feeling bad, and I went up to her to apologise. I didn't know what to say. I just felt really bad and still on my heart for this young lady. And as I started to apologise to the mum, she took both my hands in her hands and she looked me in the eye and she said, "Why are you saying sorry? You have brought us joy and happiness. Yesterday, when you prayed for my daughter for the first time in 5 years, her shaking stopped and she was still. You showed us that God has not forgotten us. God showed us that he can heal my child. You have brought hope back into my home." As followers of Christ, we are bearers of hope. We enter situations that look unchanged on the outside, yet we carry a hope that opens people's hearts to the possibility of God. Hope that reminds the forgotten that they are seen. Hope that tells the broken they are loved. Hope that tells the sinner they are forgiven. And hope that whispers to the weary, there is more to life than this. So if you ever doubt the difference you're making, if you ever wonder whether what you are doing matters, if you ever feel like the problems around you are too big and your influence is too small, remember, Jesus changed people without always changing their circumstances. And he is doing the same through you. You bring light into darkness, salt into brokenness, and hope into hopeless situations. That hope is Christ himself. This hope changes eternity, not just circumstances. So keep going. Keep shining, keep loving, keep praying, keep obeying, keep showing up. Because the difference you make is not measured by changed circumstances, but by the hope that you carry. And that hope changes everything. Amen.